first of all thank our guest speakers who are here today. Ms. Ashonda Blue, who is the co-owner and CEO of Innovative Senior Solutions. Thank you for coming, Ashonda. Mr. Rick Whaley, who is the Chief Executive Officer and President of Citizens Bank of Americus. Rick, thank you. And Ms. Susan Bruns, who is the Chief Nursing Officer at Phoebe Sumter. Susan, thank you so much for coming. Graduating seniors, congratulations. You're part of our first graduate reception. I can't remember if your group was the first group that we did a freshman reception for or not. I think maybe it was the semester or the term after y'all. But at least we'll end it correctly, we'll end it well with congratulations to all of you. And hopefully our speakers will be able to talk with you about ethics and leave you with a parting thought about the importance of ethical business. Before I turn this over, every semester we recognize outstanding business graduates. We recognize one on campus and we recognize one online. And so I'm going to take the opportunity to go ahead and do that right now. The first person I want to recognize is our online student. And our online student who is graduating this semester is a management major. Her name is Chastity Olson. Hello, Chastity. Chastity was going to remote into us. Chastity is active duty in the Army. She's an intelligence analyst with the Army, and she is stationed in South Korea. Even though it is now about 1:30 in the morning there, she was going to remote in, and we were going to present it to her. However, their status has changed. They're on a higher alert status, and so her shifts has changed, and she's not going to be able to remote into us. Chastity, before she became an online student, she graduated from high school in Sylvester. She was an on-campus student here, was in the National Guard, got called to active duty, and is now married. Her husband is also stationed with her in Korea. At the end of this tour, they will be moving to Colorado. And so Chastity has maintained a high GPA. I think she's got about a 3.5 right now, despite working full-time in a foreign country. And I've had her in class this semester, and she's been very active in class, and it's just been a joy to have. So Chastity, congratulations, and thank you for your service. We appreciate all that you do. So congratulations to Chastity Olson. Our on-campus student this semester is actually an on-campus / online student because she has done a little bit of both. Lauren Cordell is our outstanding business graduate. She's a human resources major. She was active, has been active in Enactus. She's a member of Beta Gamma Sigma. Been active, like I said, on campus. She has worked. She did an internship at Phoebe Sumter, that's what I thought, and is going to be working there after she graduates. So we are very, very proud of her, and to show Lauren's dedication. Lauren had, right before our Thanksgiving break, she emailed me and said, I'm not going to be in class Tuesday because I'm having surgery, but I'll see you on Monday. She was in class Tuesday. She's been here. She's not feeling great, but doing well. Lauren, I'm hoping you're feeling better. So thank you, Lauren. Congratulations, and let me present you your plaque. All right, I'm going to turn this over now to Mr. Bryce Benton, who is the SGA president and also a business major. Continuing a long line of leadership in the business school. So thank you, Bryce, for coming today, and he's going to introduce our panel discussion and get us started. So Bryce, thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. I believe this time we'll have the panelists and myself come up at the table here, and then we'll start the discussion from there. All right, well, I think Dr. Wilson has already introduced everyone on the panel with their name and also occupation. And thank you for the introduction of me as well. Serve as a student government president for the students on campus, and also pursuing a degree in marketing through the business school as most of the students are here. Going off of that, I would like to kind of transition into the panel and give a little more of background as far as education and more of a day-to-day operation and experience that we can have from the panel here. Before we get into this, so I'd like to thank both Dr. Wilson and Dr. Chokas for planning this event and having the first inaugural Excellence Through Ethics thing here that we have on campus. And moving into that, panelists, if you don't mind, just going down the line here, or whoever would like to offer it the first opportunity, give us maybe a little bit of background about yourself and your education experience and maybe the day-to-day operation of what you would do in your current occupation.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll start. I'm Ishonda Blue. I am the CEO, co-owner of Innovative Senior Solutions. We started our business right here in Americus. I graduated actually from here. I'm an alumni of Georgia Southwestern Nursing Department. I have an associate and a bachelor's degree from here. What I do day to day, it's pretty demanding. We're in one of the fastest growing industries right now in the world, which is caregiving, and that's what we do. We prevent seniors from going to a nursing home, and so we provide care in their home, and our goal is to keep them from going into a nursing home and to stay in the community as long as possible. So right now I'm overseeing day-to-day operations and trying to work on growing our business as well. But that's a little bit about me.
Well, good morning. I'm Rick Whaley, and it's a pleasure to be with you all today. And to the graduating seniors, best wishes and good luck in your careers going forward. It's an exciting time for all of y'all. I remember being there. I'm kind of old, but not that old, but I remember graduating. So give you a little bit background on me. I kind of did things differently. I joined the Army out of high school and served 5 years on active duty as a U.S. Army Green Beret. Decided about year 4 into my 5-year career that it probably made a lot of sense to go to college. So I decided I would not re-up, and I would attend a college. I grew up here in Americus, and so decided to come back and go to school at Georgia Southwestern. At that time, it's Georgia Southwestern College. And it's interesting that one thing I learned, if you go to class every day and you study a little bit at night, college is really pretty easy. And so that's what I did, and I finished in 3 years. That was when we were on the quarter system, not semester system, and I could take 20 hours a quarter. And anyway, finished up. I majored in political science, but somehow became a banker, and they don't really mesh together. But background on that is I thought I was going to go to law school, decided against that. Then I was going to go into federal law enforcement, and when I graduated from Southwestern in '89, there were a lot of government hiring freezes in place, so I couldn't get a date to go to the FBI Academy. So I needed a job, and so I applied to a bank, and they hired me, and that was about 25 years ago, and things worked out great. I took the job only because I thought I needed a job, and I thought I'll do something more serious in a couple of years, but it worked out great for me. Been a banker for 25 years. The last 15 years I've served as the president and CEO of Citizens Bank of Americas. Prior to that, I worked for a big national bank, Wachovia Bank. But my day-to-day responsibilities in running Citizens Bank of Americas involves a lot of things. providing strategic direction for the bank, overseeing our risk management. Risk management is extremely important in the banking industry, personnel management, and business development. So I wear a lot of hats, and I also trade our bond portfolio. Every bank has an investment portfolio in addition to the loans that we make, and I manage that bond portfolio for the bank as well.
Responsibility. My name is Susan Bruns, and I'm not used to sitting in front of business majors. I'm used to sitting usually in front of the nursing department. So anyway, I am the Chief Nursing Officer at Phoebe Sumter. I've been a nurse 31 years, and when I say that out loud, it's shocking. So I am originally from the Chicago area, and so I went to school in Valparaiso University, and I love to plug that, and I look around to see if anybody light bulbs go on, and usually not down here in South Georgia, but every now and then somebody will mention you have a good basketball team, and that's true.
Did the Cubs win the World Series?
Come on. Go Cubs. I can't believe you said that, because you know I've been so excited about all that. That got me off track, but that's all right. So then I was early on starting my career, and my husband was too, so we moved around the country several times. So I've had a lot of different careers in nursing. That's the beauty of nursing, is that you can always find a job almost anywhere. And we've lived in Coffeyville, Kansas. My husband worked in Hicksville, Ohio, but we lived in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I've lived in Syracuse, New York, and Amarillo, Texas, and then we settled here. So, and I've been in Americus for 21 years, and at Phoebe Sumter for 21 years. So, that's also how I've developed my career at Phoebe by by background. I'm a critical care nurse, and so then you just start kind of acquiring more skills in a community hospital. I only knew about open heart when I first came here, and my first patient here was a snake bite, and I would tell you, and a child. So that was very interesting, because the only snakes that I encountered were in captivity. So, and now that I've been here 20 years, I have certainly seen lots of more snakes than that. So anyway, throughout in my bio, I will say that I have done lots of things. And when the tornado, which maybe y'all are familiar with, happened, it devastated our hospital. And I was very instrumental in transitioning to our new hospital, and I was offered the opportunity to become the Chief Nursing Officer. And so my day-to-day responsibility is complicated, and I always get all my steps in every day because of my job, but I'm responsible for all the clinical aspects of the hospital, and that's including pharmacy, radiology. Nursing, of course, is my number one responsibility. Then the clinical laboratory, pathology, and I think maybe radiology, if I didn't say that already. So I am also, when you said something about risk management, I said, oh, that's also occurs in the hospital too. We really want to provide, make sure the quality care and customer service is number one priority, and keeping our patients safe. So I'm happy to be here.
Well, thank you for the introduction, panelists, and definitely thank you for being here too. Certainly some diverse backgrounds throughout the panel. Hopefully will contribute to the discussion here. Before we proceed into the discussion further, just kind of going to lay out the agenda and kind of how I'll be moderating the event. We'd like for it to stay as sort of a casual, informal discussion and conversation as we walk through it. It's going to be broken up into two phases, essentially. The first, I'll be asking the panelists questions that have been provided by the School of Business for them to answer, and they can respond accordingly. And then followed by that, we'll actually would like to hear some of the questions from the graduating business students that we have in the crowd there, so then they can respond to any questions that you have or any concerns that you may feel that you can address here. So, topic that we have moving into the discussion now is ethics and ethical behavior and assessing ethics as far as from a hiring standpoint in terms of an employer trying to hire an employee. I did some research myself, so I'll kind of go into just a brief background of ethics and why I think we're all here and could hear that's pretty significant to graduating students. We hear a lot about it in the classes that we have here, and it's integrated through the pre-business classes all the way up to the senior level. And across the country, you'll see that there are a lot of different institutions that are sort of implementing programs, different types of courses, and even departments that are centered around ethics and ethical practices and concepts. And you ask yourself, why is that? And really I think a huge reason is because there's a lot of businesses and corporations and major corporations out there that are starting to do the same thing and starting to implement a foundation of ethics and in terms of how they want their strategic planning to be operated and where they see their business in 5 years. Their planning has a lot to do with ethics and ethical practices and concepts. So from there, the first step in normally assessing when the businesses start to develop the plan for these ethical practices is mainly looking at the people and who they hire for potentially being in that business or corporation. So with that, I'll ask the panelists a couple of questions, and mostly going to start off through the application process and how you would determine as an employer if you were given an application, kind of walking through that hiring process and what you would determine from an ethical perspective. So the first question that I have here is, and there's really no order to anyone answering. You can answer as you please. How would you all assess the ethical attributes or characteristics as you all go through the hiring process and hiring a candidate?
Sure, I'll lead off. Well, first of all, I want to point out that we find it very difficult to really assess a candidate's ethics during a job interview. If you've been through a job interview and you do your homework, you're well prepared, you kind of know the response to various questions, and it's unless you're going through multiple interviews with multiple interviewers, which we don't, or my bank's not that large to do that. It's basically 2 people interviewing 1 candidate. There's just not a lot of time to assess that, so it is difficult. But there are some practices that we use to try to uncover someone's ethics. The first thing we do is we really study their resume, their past experience, and we try to pull from that or take into account what we think their character is, because usually that past experience, that resume, will give us some sense of really who they are and what their values are. The second thing we do during the actual interviewing process is we ask what's commonly referred to as behavioral questions. And so, I can ask someone during a job interview, do you have high ethical standards? So what's the answer going to be? Who's going to say no? So instead of asking that, we'll ask a question such as, give me an example of a ethical decision that you had to make on the job or while you were in school, and what factors did you consider in reaching that decision? So that's not a yes or no answer. That applicant or that candidate's got to really, they got to start talking. And you know, if you've, any of you that are human resources majors have probably learned that the more someone talks, the more you'll learn about their values and their past experiences and so forth. So we try to ask those type behavioral questions, and one is, you know, give us an example of where you had to make a difficult decision regarding ethics. And it's interesting what you hear. We typically take it a step further, because one question, if you ask them to give you one example, most people can come up with a pretty good one example. But we try to ask for 2 or 3. And that really kind of throws, we're not trying to trick them, we're just trying to get more. Again, the more we can get them to talk and open up, I think the better we can assess really what their core values are and does it fit well with our organization. So, you know, we ask them to give us 2 to 3 examples of situations that they've been in where they had to make a difficult ethical decision. And it's interesting what they come back with. And that usually gives us a good idea of what their core values are, and then, you know, we see if that fits our values and the high ethical standards that we're looking for. So y'all be prepared for 3 questions, 3 examples. Yeah.
So at the hospital, it's we outsource our we have a recruitment team. And so, first of all, if you were to apply at Phoebe Sumter, you would get a phone interview first. They're really just feeling out if you have the right qualifications, what your true interests are, make sure you have the right degrees, those kind of things. And then, once they determine you're a candidate for that, you have to take, we call it HSI, and really it's 100 questions. They're all open-ended questions. They're not yes or no's, like he said. And then you end up with a score. And so in the scoring process, that's what they give us to interview you. And so it will say, ahead of time, we'll know where some of your weaknesses are, like, or they overestimate their compassion. Maybe you want to ask some questions on some ethical situations, or some examples like that, and we sort of have that all vetted for us before we even interview a candidate, which is very, very helpful, because especially in the nursing world, you're not going to want to hire a nurse that's not compassionate, because then you invest a lot of time training those people, and they're not going to care for the patients the way you need to. And so then when there are those ethical questions, and they're easy questions at first, like if your boss wants you to do something that isn't according to the rules of the hospital, how would you respond to that? They want to know a response to certain examples. So you would just keep asking those questions until you got to know the candidate. So. And also, I just feel like you should also know that it takes, you can't get a job at the hospital in like a day. I mean, by the time you do a phone interview, you meet the candidates. We always do panel interviews, maybe even have HR interview. So sometimes it takes 30 days to get somebody on board. And, you know, a lot of places, if you resign your position at the hospital, you have to give 2 weeks notice. Well, that's not enough time for us to fill your position, so we're always scrambling. So I'm just trying to say, be patient with that. Don't give up when you're trying to apply for positions, because you don't know, they might have a recruitment team or something that slows everything, red tape, bureaucracy, that kind of thing. So be patient with that too.
I have a different approach. In fact, I'm directly involved in the hiring for our company, because we serve a very, very precious population, which is seniors, and we are hiring people to go into their homes. So you can imagine how important ethics is for us. And so one of the things that I found is that it's best to define the culture for your company, and we've done that. We have 5 core values. And they're simple. It's honesty, integrity, caring, professional, and reliability. That's what we're looking for. And when we interview, those are the questions that we have developed to try to assess that core value. So we're trying to hire people who believe what we believe. And that's what we're looking for. We check references, which is probably one of the two important things that I've seen in trying to assess ethics is reference checks, find out what they've done in the past. That's one. And the second one, and you're not going to believe it, but it's Facebook. Every person that I hire, I go to their Facebook page, and I want to know what's going on with them day to day, how they really think, how they really operate, who they really are. And so I just want, and that's my biggest tip to you guys, is know what you're putting on Facebook, because I look at it, because I want to know who I'm inviting to my family, because our clients are our family. So that's my
So the next question is really industry related, and you all may have a different answer for it, seeing that you're in different industries. And Mrs. Bruns, I think you may have touched on this just a little bit, but how are ethics relevant in each of the industries that you work in on a day-to-day basis, and maybe give a couple of examples as to what you've seen in the past in terms of ethical standards of practice?
That's sort of multifaceted in the hospital setting, because, at first when they asked me to come, I was like, I'm not really the expert on the ethics. We have an ethics committee, actually, but that is for something entirely different. It's usually like end-of-life issues, things like that. So that's an example of where we use the ethics committee. But we also deal with people's, lives, medications. If you choose to divert or things like that, that's there's a lot of temptation in the medical field. I think also it's in your everyday practice and when you're encountering patients in your work. We also have HIPAA and people's privacy to obtain. That is very important, because the community has to know they trust us with their care. So make sure that we're not sharing any information that is private. It's a small community. Sometimes that's a little more challenging for us because everybody knows each other and are curious. By nature, people want to really help. And so sometimes just saying something like, yes, so-and-so was in the hospital, could be, you could lose your job for doing that. So those are like 3 examples that we use ethics all the time.
Third time's a charm.
Okay, we're going to try it one more time. Having high ethical standards is critical in the financial services industry. Our reputation is based on the conduct of our people. A banker's role is one of stewardship and trust. You trust us to protect your money, to protect your sensitive personal information. You trust us to sell you the right products and services and financial solutions, and that's a big responsibility that everybody in the financial services industry has to take on. So it's real important that we maintain that high standard of ethics. I'm not sure there's any other profession that has a higher standard. There are a lot of professions that have the same level of standards, but I'm not sure there's one that has a higher. And if we lose your trust and our reputation gets soiled, we lose business, and it takes years and years to recover that. The temptations are great in the financial services industry. We handle a lot of cash. We have access to a lot of confidential information. Typically, compensation, or what you are paid, is based on your performance. And I'm going to speak to that in just a minute. I do not like incentive compensation plans at all. And sometimes just your job security is tied to your financial performance. So it's because of that, it's easy for your ethics to be compromised when you got cash in front of you, you got all this confidential information that everybody likes to talk, and you want to leak that information out, and the fact that your incentive or your compensation is based on your performance, or your job security is based on your performance. Recently in the news, and I'm not bashing one of my competitors, but it's been all over the news. Wells Fargo Bank is a great example of how a faulty reward system to their employees, incentive compensation plan, can induce unethical behavior. And as a result of what happened with their scandal, some 5,300 employees were fired for opening roughly 2 million checking accounts and credit cards that customers had not authorized. And they did that so they'd meet their sales goals and keep their jobs. The CEO was forced to resign and had to forfeit $43 million in compensation. Now, he's still pretty well off, but just still $43 million is a lot of compensation to walk away from. And the bank was fined $190 million by several federal regulatory agencies and some local agencies. So, that's a prime example of the intent was good. It was to motivate employees to sell, but they took it one step further, didn't have the proper controls in place, and it just got out of control. And Wells Fargo it'll take many years for them to recover from this, and I don't think we've seen the end of it. There's still pretty major investigations going on. So that's an example of where a company that's very well respected and had high ethical standards, but it didn't turn out that way because of a faulty reward system that they had in place.
I want to touch on that a little bit. Again, I'm coming from a whole different perspective. But ethical standards of practice is tied into our culture. And one thing I would love for you guys to take away is that every company, wherever you work, has a culture. And you probably want to ask them, what are their core values? What do they believe in? And so for us, our culture, we've tried to tie our core values into everything we do, starting with hiring. It goes along with performance evaluations. If someone gets counseled, it's based on those core values. And we do have an incentive recognition program, but it's not like the banks. But it is to reward those people who actually demonstrate those core values. So if someone comes to work every day and never take off, that's when we call them superstars. That's important to us. And so we want to make sure that those people get recognized for living out those core values. So that's how we tie it into our everyday practices.
Thank you, panelists. I believe we have time for one more question through School of Business questions I have here. Last one is mainly the changes that you've seen in the past years. So what changes have you seen in terms of the industry focused on ethics or moral behavior? Has it increased as a focal point on ethics and trying to put ethics as a focus on the industry in terms of hiring people, or is it digress?
Well, since the financial services industry was responsible for the great financial crisis, I'll lead off. There is a heightened level of awareness on ethics in the financial services industry. There were some missteps prior to the financial crisis that were, again, a result of faulty incentive plans, faulty reward plans, where mortgage originators received a higher compensation for doing subprime mortgages versus a prime or Alt-A mortgages, but because that's what the market wanted, that's what the secondary market was buying, and so They said, look, if you close a mortgage for a subprime borrower, which typically carried a higher rate, you'll get a higher commission than you will if you make a mortgage loan to someone who's got good credit and is a prime credit customer. So what am I going to do if I'm that mortgage originator? I'm going to go for the higher incentive. And that was just in a nutshell kind of what drove the financial crisis. I don't know that we'll ever learn our lesson. We have the Wells Fargo scandal that came up just a couple of months ago, and you're like, just when we felt like our industry had learned its lesson and was doing all the right things, then this Wells Fargo scandal comes up. But there will continue to be heightened awareness on ethics and in the financial services industry. But I'm not sure that we, as a whole, the industry as a whole, will ever learn its lesson.
In the medical field, obviously, we're with the changes in healthcare in general, hospitals can't do it by themselves anymore. We just can't keep our community healthy by ourselves. So we have to do a lot of collaborating with with our community, with home health, with the health department, Middle Flint. We're just reaching out to the community, also with other hospitals closing. It kind of taps in that we're worried about other counties, not just Sumter County any longer. So that's where I see our future is more out in the community. So we are really focused on keeping people healthy and not really focusing on of course, it sounds kind of ironic that I don't want patients to come to the hospital, but it is more cost effective if everybody stays healthier. And there's a lot more focus on end of life issues, how you really want to, because people spend the most amount of healthcare dollars in their last year of life. So that's why we are focusing more on making your decisions while you're healthy and not put a burden on the families in the hospital. And those are all issues that we're working with the community. I also think that in the workforce in general, we have ethics training every year, and we focus on that really intensively. And we, at first I would say we did web-in services, and you just go on the computer and answer a bunch of questions and you're done. Well, we found that you need to be more serious when it comes to ethics. So we have face-to-face training, they're mandatory, and it's ongoing, and it's every year because it's very serious for the hospitals.
Yeah, I would have to say the same for our industry as well. I think ethics is going to be the key to our success because seniors, over 1 million people turn age 65 every day. I mean, it's just going to be, the number of seniors is going to be alarming. So that means we're going to have a lot of competition. And for a long time, we were the only private home care provider here in Americus. I think it's maybe 3 now, 3 or 4, and it's going to change. We know it's going to change. But we know for our industry, our key is going to be ethics because it's going to be people who do what they say they're going to do, who have those core values that I talked about. And it's so funny, me and my sister Jessica, we go to Atlanta a lot, and we get to speak. And Atlanta is already flooded with agencies just like us. I mean, flooded. But it's interesting how when we're up there talking, they want us to come to Atlanta. And we're thinking, why do you want us to come to Atlanta? It's the ethics. It's because people don't care about those things and don't talk about those things. And so we know that's going to be very, very relevant to our industry.
Thank you, Neil. So, do we have time to open any questions up? Okay. All right. Well, at this time, I'll begin the second phase of the Q&A portion. If there are any students, faculty, or staff that had a question for our panelists, you feel free to ask at this time. Just raise your hand. I believe Dr. Jugers or myself can bring the microphone to you.
I've got several, but I'll just ask one. Elder care abuse, financial services issues, Medicare fraud, all these kinds of things. We talk to our students about government regulation, and so there's government regulation in all of those areas to protect consumers and patients. And in elder care, there's more and more legislation coming. And my position is that the industry is almost always given a chance to act responsibly or act ethically before regulation happens. How do y'all feel about that?
For us, we have to report everything to the state. I mean, we report surgical site infections, ventilator-acquired pneumonia, CAUTIs, which is catheter infections from a catheter, bloodline infections. It's a line that goes into you to receive blood or antibiotics or whatnot. Those get infected easily. We have to report all these important things. So we focus on, programs that, to prevent all those things, so we don't have to, we haven't had any of those reportables, and I can't remember, maybe, it's been more than a year, because we focus on the quality, and so you don't have to do all that reporting and then have your data. I'm sure that if you look on, there's some buzz about people getting your data and putting it out there, like Leapfrog reported that Phoebe Putney scored an F, but they took their data and skewed it in a certain way and said they had a high infection rate, when in fact that wasn't really the case. But your, like Rick says, your reputation does get smeared, and people go by those things that they see. So that's why all of those reporting, I think those reporting things are important to keep your quality at, use best practice and evidence-based medicine to guide how you care for your patients. So, but
Well,
all the changes in insurance and the Affordable Health Care Act is making me nervous. So we'll see how that goes. I don't know.
The banking industry is, I would argue, is one of the most heavily regulated industries in the nation. And the Dodd-Frank bill that was passed in 2010 put even more heavy regulation on us. A lot of it was a reaction to what happened in the financial crisis. A lot of it is parts of provisions of Dodd-Frank is to protect the consumer, some of which was needed, some of which I believe is overkill. I do want to stress that the majority of the people that work in the banking industry, the financial services industry, do the right thing and make the right choices. It's that small minority percentage that creates problems for the rest of us. I think heavy regulation will continue in our industry just because of what I said earlier. The temptations are so great. And I think the biggest temptation is the financial incentives, which is based on pay for performance. And I don't do that at my bank. I'm opposed to it. Think about this: when next time you're in a clothing store and where the person that sells you that piece of clothing gets paid a commission, not an hourly paid, and you ask them, how does this dress or how does this coat look on me? Don't even ask them, because why are they going to say it doesn't? And the same thing in the financial services industry is that as long as people are compensated for the number of products they sell, unfortunately, they're not always going to look out for the best interests of the customer. And until we can figure out how to align the incentive compensation plans to what benefits the customer and not the financial institution, we're always going to have some unethical behavior in our industry.
I think for us, we try to make sure that the regulations, because we're heavily regulated as well, but we try to make sure those regulations are minimum. We try to go beyond and above and beyond what those regulations require. And you use the term elder abuse. Well, that is very, very prevalent in our industry. And just to give you an example of that, one of the things that is required for our industry by regulation is that a nurse go into the home every 60 days to make sure those clients are okay. Well, we try to go beyond that. We go every 30 days. And we also have a caregiver advocate that goes in and just does a customer service visit. So my point is staying above the regulation and doing more than what's just required, the minimum.
I believe you have time for one more question, so.
Unless there's a student. I think that in a perfect world, we would say that ethics is very simple. It's right, it's wrong. But in the real world, there seems to be a lot of gray. Do you feel in your specific piece of your industry that you have to have a zero tolerance, right or wrong, or are there times when you can have some gray?
I'll take that one first. I'm very passionate about this. For us, when we hire, is no gray. And we have taken it, we've done it so long that we've already outlined, we have a list of things that we call non-ethical behavior. We list them out, and they're very detailed and specific to what we do, so that when we bring someone on board and we're onboarding them, that they understand these are things that just are not tolerated. And if they do it, there's no gray. So we try to define it up front, and we keep it before them, we keep in-servicing on them, but it's very, very important to get rid of that gray, because when you have gray area, then we don't want to leave it to them to decide what's right or wrong. We want to make sure they understand what's acceptable and what's not acceptable.
Mark, that's a great question. I'll answer it in two phases. One, to tell you from my bank, there is no gray area. 99% of the time, maybe 1% of the time there may be, but we make it very clear to our employees, you know, what kind of ethical conduct we expect, and we have that in our personnel manual. We have a section that is code of conduct, code of ethics, and they're required to read that and acknowledge that they've read it. It's very specific. It tells you multiple examples of where we think you crossed the line, which again is very easy to do in the banking industry. But every now and then you do run into a situation where there's just that 1% where, you know, well, is this really that serious of an offense or not? But we try to toe the line and say there is no gray area. It's black and white, sorry, but that's just the way it is. I do just want to, and I think that's the point that we're trying to make to all of you here is, and it goes back to Mark's question, is that, you know, the clear choices on ethics is very easy because we were raised, all of us were raised with good values, and we know we're not supposed to steal, we're not supposed to cheat, we're not supposed to take advantage of someone else for our personal benefit. All of those we know. And typically the very clear choices are easy to make. But when you get into the business world, there's going to be those choices that aren't so clear, that you're not really sure. And especially if nobody's looking, you're like, well, I'm not really stealing money, I'm not really breaking the law, but what do I do? And that's where you challenge. That's the big test. And I'm going to give you a quick example. I know we're running out of time, but during my banking career, I had a customer, small business customer, I thought a lot of, very close to them. They were going through some difficult financial times, and they were struggling. They were not paying the IRS their income taxes, and the IRS wants you to pay your taxes. And so the company, for the most part, rarely ever had money in its checking account. We get a letter from the IRS, and it's called a IRS levy, and basically what the IRS is instructing us to do, because they have the power to do that, is they said put a freeze on all the money that's in this customer's account, because they owe us back taxes, and send it to us. Whatever's in the account that day, when you receive this letter, you're required by law to put a freeze on that account. Okay? Follow me? So I get the letter. It's not certified mail. It's not overnight. They have no idea what day I got it. So I get the letter, I read it, I understand what the instructions say. I go to the customer's account. The day before, the customer actually had a negative balance in their account. That day that I got the letter from the IRS, they had $40,000 in their account. because they had just gotten some customers to pay them. And I knew they needed that $40,000 to make payroll and everything else. So here I am, sitting here with this letter, and I got a decision to make. Okay? I got to make the right choice. Now, my allegiance was to the small business customer, to my customer, not to the IRS. But I knew, and I said, well, how's the IRS even going to know when I got this letter? Because they wouldn't. They have no idea. It was not certified. I didn't have to sign for it. They don't know if I got it on the 28th, or I got it on the 25th, or I got it on the 30th. I mean, there is a little bit of a range there, but they had no idea. I could have very well said, well, I got it the day before, and the day before they didn't have any money in the account. And the way the levies work is it's whatever's in the account that day. The next day, it doesn't matter. It's the day you open that letter. So here I am thinking, oh, they don't know when I got it. I hate to put a freeze on this $40,000. Customer needs it. My allegiance to that customer. It was tempting, but I did the right thing, and I said, and that's what I've always done in my career, is do the right thing, and that's what I think we're trying to stress to y'all. Do the right thing, and the right thing was to do exactly what the letter said, and that's what I did. So I mean that's a prime example of, I probably could have gotten by with it. Nobody would have known it. IRS never would have questioned me. Customer would have been happy. Life goes on, but it was the wrong thing to do if I had done it any way other than what I was supposed to do.
I would throw in transparency there too along with what they say, because you do have to stay black and white otherwise. But if you're in the situation where it is gray, usually transparency and talking it out and getting, you know, it seems to be, if you're all of a sudden, if you're starting to hide something, it pretty much means it's probably not right. So I would throw that word in there too.
Okay, if there are no more questions, I believe it's time to bring it down to a close. At this time, I'll turn it over to Dr. Wilson, and she'll close the event out for us. Again, panelists, thank you for serving on the panels of discussion.
Folks, this is going to wind up our first annual Excellence Through Ethics recognition. I'd like to have all the graduating seniors stand so everybody else can congratulate you with me. As the Dean of the Business School, I want to thank you for your leadership, for your support of GSW School of Business, and ask you to continue that through following us on Facebook and Twitter, and staying in touch with us to help us celebrate your successes as you move on in your careers. Y'all can sit down. We've got them trained. They did good. One thing I would add to that, I think, Rick, what you were talking about is something that we all face. I face it in my job as well, and those are ethical dilemmas. It's where there's not really a perfect answer. There's not, you know, whatever you decide is going to hurt somebody or is going, you know, and we face that in HR. And you face it in nursing, and you face it in senior care, and we face it in education, where, you know, it's like you said, there's a bad choice and there's a worse choice, and those are the ones where, you know, I think these three people have given you some great advice to lean on in your careers, and that is to be transparent, to share your decisions so that other people, A, can see how your decision process is going and put some checks and balances on you if necessary. And second, so that there's not an air of secrecy. How did they make this decision? They must have done this, that, or the other. The clearer you can be in your choices, the more consistent. HR people are tired of me saying always be consistent, but the more consistent you are, the more predictable you are, so the more people can depend on you in your decisions. Rick's issue of it always comes back to do the right thing. It does. A lot of times we can convince ourselves that watching out for our customers is the right thing. So again, especially as young people going into business, I would urge you to consult with other people. That may not have that same interest you do, to consult with somebody who's a mentor or somebody who's a supervisor, and ask for their guidance. And finally, as Ashonda said, your reputation in the business world is going to be made on whether people trust your core values or not. Whether you're in Atlanta or whether you're in Americus, Georgia, the ethics you show, the social responsibility you show, the good sense and good judgment that you use are going to be the things that mark you, not just in the short term, but in the long term. And I feel comfortable that you can look at the professors you've had and know that you've had ethical people directing your course of studies as you have matriculated here at Georgia Southwestern. As part of our core values is that we treat you right, that we make the right decisions, not for ourselves, but for you. And Rick, you'll be pleased to know that there is no pay for performance issue here. I don't get paid. We don't get paid for teaching more students. We do get paid for excellence in service, but not based on the numbers we serve. You know, we could do that for graduate school. So at any rate, thank you again for coming. Graduating seniors, we will see you in about a week and a half, and good luck on your final exams. And please use ethical behavior while you're taking your final exams. We would not like to see you not graduate as a result of unethical choices. So thank you again. Thank all of you for coming, and we will adjourn now and talk to y'all soon. Thank you.